Hey, welcome to Appthropology, the podcast where we chat with the people behind awesome mobile apps. We'll look to understand the biggest lessons they've learned, bringing value to people, and we'll also dive into interesting stories and insights about how they build and who they build for. I'm your host, Jim Lorraine, head of growth at AMP.
I'm your other host, Paul, data scientist and CEO of AMP.
Yep, and this week's guest is Annika Dunaway. So she's a senior growth consultant at Phiture, and I'm so excited to have her on the podcast. So Annika is an incredibly experienced marketer, serving in marketing and CRM roles in virtually every single industry in existence, from training and education to food delivery and travel, and even health and fitness. So she's done everything from helping companies establish their first CRM systems to doing large-scale A/B testing and campaign optimization for giant multinational companies who employ tens of thousands of employees, deployed in more countries than I even knew existed. So if that's not enough, she's studying neuroscience and psychology on the side. So Annika, welcome to the podcast. And is there anything you haven't done?
Well, that was a pretty big introduction, honestly. I guess that's my problem. I'm pretty interested in too many things sometimes. So there are definitely things I haven't done. Yeah, definitely things I'm also interested in. So
I can see that. It's awesome. So I know I gave a brief overview, but you really have touched like so many industries, and I'd kind of love to tap into. I mean, your clients have to benefit so much from that. You've probably seen so much. So I'm curious, what has been your favorite role or industry so far, and why?
That's a tough one. I think all of the ones that I've worked in had special challenges, especially like health. Health is a tricky one because there's a lot of limitations and you find workarounds, and it's pretty interesting. But I think my favorite one is health and fitness, because I also love CrossFit, and CrossFitters always have to talk about that they love CrossFit. That's a rule. So that's one of the things that I really like. So so that's one of the favorite ones. So one of my favorite roles was at AidFit, but also because the company was really nice. We had really a lot of fun there as a little family, basically.
That's awesome. And the way you guys do pull-ups in CrossFit is totally cheating. I'm just going to call it out.
Well, it's about the speed, right? So you cannot make it super perfect. It has to be fast. So that's what it is.
I'm not picking on you. I get called out for cheating because I try to keep. I've been told my form is sloppy, so I try to keep good form. But no, that's awesome. So again, you've been in kind of every industry. So I would love to touch on that a little more. Can you tell us from a CRM side? What do they all have in common? So like, what are the struggles that you see kind of across the board that transcend whether we're life cycle fitness, or food delivery, any of those? And then what are the similarities and like approaches that you kind of see?
I think the similarities, and that is rather a negative thing than a positive thing that I've seen over the years, is that there's often a lack of communication between the marketers, like the CRM people, and the product teams. So it's one thing that I see across the board, and that's something that I also talk to my clients about a lot, because as a CRM team, I actually think you should not be part of the marketing team. You should be part of a product team, because you touch the product in multiple ways. You might even interrupt the user journey with your messaging that you have planned, and the product team has not planned it this way. So I think it's a lot of communication that is often missing, and that is one of the things that I've seen a lot of times and that I still see. And that's one of the things that I try to kind of change also with my clients, to get it into their head that it's more important to have these teams combined.
This is fascinating to me. That's not the answer I expected. Go.
For me, I feel like that's the conversation right there. That's something that I've started to observe as well. And I think it's almost amazing. Like, it's a gray area where it doesn't really get the oversight of product, and it doesn't really get the oversight of marketing, because marketers tend to be so focused on top of funnel. Like, that's where all the numbers are, the performance sophistication, et cetera. And yet it really is, I think, as you put it, it's part of the product experience. You've already downloaded the app. And so kind of conveying some kind of information is that product experience. It's helping you to take the next step. It's reminding you of the next step or the original value proposition. So I think that's really spot on, fascinating. But when you say that, do you find that that's generally, I mean, do you find that to be a common view, or is that, or do you find that that's something that differentiates you from a lot of your colleagues or folks on either side? What do you think about how
I think it's going into that direction where people change their mind because they see and they understand the touch points that CRM has with push notifications. Back in the days, it was only emails, right? So it wouldn't really matter what you do. You can send tons of promotions and voucher codes, and it would not have an impact on the user experience itself, like inside your product. But now everything happens on the product, like with real-time events that we are working with. So we try to trigger every time something while the user is even in the app with like in-app messages and stuff. And this can interrupt the user experience like heavily. I saw many examples during a workout. Suddenly a message pops up. You're in the middle of the workout and you're like, what is going on? Like you get a promotion. You're like, that is the worst experience ever. So, and those are the things that I think people rather see. And I also wrote an article about it last year. I did a little poll on Braze Bonfire, one of the bigger CRM communities. And there I actually saw that most of the people clicked, my team is part of marketing and not of product. And that was kind of my evidence to build up on this article and build up on this in my article. So, yeah.
All right.
I'm fascinated.
We'll have the link to that article in the comments.
I'll make a note.
Sure.
Make a note. Braze Bonfire article. Your Braze Bonfire was a poll. Why I thought it was really interesting is because I thought you would go like customer engagement route, user engagement route, but you went company infrastructure. Like that's so interesting to me.
I mean, it goes together, right? I don't think that we have to see everything in like separate funnels. Like engaging the user happens on the product. If the teams don't work together on the product and making the product better, this also reflects to the outside. This is what your product looks like to the user. So this will not engage the user. If you are not aligned internally, how will you engage your user externally? I think you always have to see these both sides on this.
Oh, yeah.
And so the user engagement, definitely a big topic for everyone. I think what most of the clients struggle with is actually user activation and then engagement. But activation is often a problem because of this whole infrastructure of tons of apps that are already in the store. People come, download an app, see, oh, I don't like it. They delete it. You don't even have the chance to engage them, right? So I think that's more of a struggle these days than even engagement only.
I see that too with a lot of times I'll download one just
a little bit more.
Yeah.
Can we dig into that just a little bit more? Like, so is that because, so activation is specifically for new users. When you define activation, you're sort of saying the initial steps you have to take in order to get to some form of value. And then is engagement just a sort of a default? It just happens, so it's not as important, or is it that churn is sort of seen as so inevitable that you have to constantly be focused on new users to get just one slice of value, and then it's kind of why if activation is really about new users, why is it?
I think you have to see also here the whole funnel. So you obviously acquire the users first, which is like usually through a bunch of ads or something. The user comes to your app finally, and then they go through the onboarding funnel, but they drop off on screen 4 because suddenly they have to enter their email address, or you ask them for push opt-in and they're like, no, I don't want the push opt-in because I don't understand the value. So I feel like activation and engagement is equally important. But if you have your user activated in a right way and they understand the value and they feel like excited to still go through the product and get guided to this main event that your app offers, then it's easier to engage them afterwards because they have understood the value, they understand your product, right? If you not put the time and effort into activation, the user will lose interest and will drop off even earlier. So, you have lost them already somewhere there, and they haven't even experienced what your product can actually do. And I think that's why it's equally important. Obviously, it's also important how you acquire the user, and you have like a consistent journey throughout the whole user lifecycle. But it's equally important, I think, to also then engage them. But you cannot engage them without activating the user. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, fair enough. I think it'll probably come up later on.
Okay.
Well, as we're talking different user stages, I would say as you start working with a new app, so like what are the first steps? I know it's a really broad question. So I mean, there are some apps that don't have any kind of infrastructure, and there are some that have a basic infrastructure set up. But what are the first steps you do? What are the first things you do when you get involved with consulting with a new app?
Well, if you say infrastructure, is it about like the tools that they are using, or is it about like the whole how they build their app, kind of how it was designed, what they're doing on the app?
I was thinking more of the tools. I was thinking more. There's an element of both.
Yeah,
I imagine that.
Let's assume the base.
Yeah. I was going to say, I'm assuming if you get involved, somebody has, and maybe not, but somebody has an app set up. So there's just the question of, are they doing, have they started doing messaging? Have they started building journeys? Have they started integrating that tool set, or have they not? So either way, when you walk in, and you can feel free to focus on one or the other, or just kind of broadly, I don't know if your steps are the same for both. What are those first steps you do to help their app grow?
Right. So for the apps that have already an infrastructure, what we do is to review the infrastructure. So for me, it's important to first understand what are the company's goals, right? What is the goal on the app? Like, is it user retention? Is it revenue? What is coming up in the first place? And then I try to break that down into smaller goals for my team and me to understand where do we focus first in order to reach that goal? Because often companies work with OKRs, which I love, because then I can easily measure the impact that we have on our ideas, also with our ideas. So what we do is to review the infrastructure. Let's say they have like 3 tools, several analytics tools, a segmentation tool, maybe, and then obviously their CRM tool. We review the full setup. We do a taxonomy review, see if it all makes sense. If often it's crazy messy, you cannot imagine, like so many events that are not needed, so many attributes useless, but they are just all fired to all ends, and you're like, oh man, this is hard to understand even. So we do the whole taxonomy review. We do campaign review if campaigns are existing. We're looking basically into the whole infrastructure. If you have an app that has nothing and they say, well, we would like to get started, then what I like to do is to also understand their goals in the first place, to then decide what is a good tool for them at this stage. Because not all companies need the same set of tools, because there are obviously big pricing differences, big feature differences. Not all features are always needed for everyone, right? Smaller companies with 10K MAUs are probably not paying for, a huge tool that they don't need at this stage. Obviously, you want to still make sure that it's scalable in the long run, because if they grow fast, the products need to grow with them. But yeah, I think those are the 2 approaches. So it's the most important is to understand the goals, like what do they want, and then I break it down into smaller goals where we review everything and then go from there.
Do you see consistency in goals? So I understand like fitness and food delivery are different, but is like the baseline what goals people have, is it kind of the same, like as far as engagement and things like that, or do you see big differences when it comes to goals?
No, I think it's the same. So often it's revenue, obviously. Subscription optimization is a big topic, and then retention and also re-engagement. So actually looking at this whole user base they have lost at some point because they haven't done things for a while or have never touched them. So re-engaging the users also often coming back a lot to us.
Mm-hmm. Can I push on the subscription one really quickly? So how do you, just because I've seen this a lot, we're talking to a lot of people who have this issue of getting people past the subscription wall. And maybe this comes in your activation piece again, but they'll say from download to using the app, great. 60, 70, something, 75% of people who download start to use it. It's great. And then the paywall goes up and I'm down to 1% to 2% people who go through the paywall. So like in that example, if that was the goal of like, I have a subscription model and I need to get more people to subscribe initially, like what are some examples of things that you would use or tools you would use to help with that?
Yeah, so I think we have always different approaches. It depends on the product itself and what they want to reach. But I'm not as specialized in subscription optimization. My colleague is, though. She does that. She loves that. I'm more on the product side of things. But the subscription thing, what we do with clients and what I've done also is experimenting with reverse trials. So not even let people hit the paywall during the onboarding, but let them try and guide them to the main event so they understand, okay, this is actually really nice. I can use this. And then they see a paywall after 7 days or something. What also works well is paywalls on features, right? So the feature paywall, because they still can use your app and you still have active users, but then some features are maybe necessary for them and they pay for it. So those are more the ones that I would go for. The hard paywall we see in onboardings does not work. Like people, as you said, they drop off. You see a drop off from 50 to 70% on a hard paywall, because by that time you haven't even seen what you get. Like you would also buy something, I don't know, the cat in the sack, if we say in German. Like you would not, like the cat in the bag, you would not just, buy something you haven't seen. So, and that's the same with apps, I think.
That's good. Paul, you had something?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's so much here. I mean, I have a question about subscription versus non-subscription, in the sense of how commonly you see one or the other. Just because I think a lot of times apps have, especially in the early days, they have this choice about whether they're going to go the subscription route or they're going to kind of try and create some kind of transaction within the app or do something more transactional. But I know that's a huge topic. Right before we hit that one, you sort of said the goals are more standardized. And I wonder is there any hidden complexity there in terms of which ones should be tackled sequentially? Let's say that there are constraints in terms of time and attention and effort. Because I've often seen people just be very confused about what their goals should be. Like they know the standard goals, like, I can improve retention or I can drive revenue. And then it's kind of like, but how do those actually determine each other? Because almost by definition, retaining someone is generating revenue from them. Otherwise, I mean, like you could have completely non-monetized retention, but probably most people don't mean that. But then like, which one is which, right? And then like which one goes first. And that's what I meant also about the activation. If you get 20% of your users through and then they're ongoing, you could focus on improving each new cohort, each monthly new cohort of new users and kind of focusing on them activating. But then you have that counter opportunity to sort of say, can we drive actually? And if your value, customer lifetime value, kind of follows a little bit of a power law, right, or isn't normally distributed, a lot of times you do have 20% of the users accounting for 80% of the value, roughly, right? Not exactly those numbers, but roughly. The subscription makes it different, because if a subscription is a flat fee, that you still end up, if you look at like deeper engagement, you'll see that like, okay, higher engaged users are doing more, but the subscription kind of cancels that out because you're forced to only get, let's say, $10 from every customer. So one who's in the app every day is paying you the same amount as one who visits it once a month and just, never forgot to turn off their subscription. Anyway, but that complexity of goal choice, how much does that show up in the early days? Or is it really just a very standard thing that people feel comfortable figuring out?
Well, I think the standard is only the kind of goals clients have, because everyone wants to make money, everyone wants to have their users, right? So that never changes. But the complexity here is then what we do is we look into where are we? Let's say if a client has a huge user base that they have lost, like let's say they're in this inactive phase where they have used the product or they tried the product, they have not uninstalled, but they haven't been there for 14 days, 20 days, something like that. And I see this is a huge chunk of users. Why not getting them back first? Because this is no effort. This is only this really low effort with a high impact usually, because you can just send them emails, but if they are on the app, you send them push notifications, obviously depending on push opt-in, but you just send them these notifications to get them back, maybe with a special offer, maybe with a feature update, something that you have done that might be interesting for the user, right? So that would be an easy choice of a goal. Activation is usually a little more expensive because it comes with acquisition. So you have acquisition costs, you will bring more users, it's more expensive. But when we see, for example, during the user onboarding, we review the onboarding fully. We look with design. Sometimes we even do user research. So we look into that and see that there are small things that we could change easily with their product team, or if the onboarding is done, even on the CRM side of things, we choose to run experiments on that side as well to see if we can improve the funnel, because in the end, this is also the money you make, right? So the user retention, I guess, it's not always the last choice, but it's the harder one, because you will put way more effort in experimenting, making different campaigns and complex campaigns that might help, and that will also take a little longer to evaluate those campaigns because they have to run for a while, obviously depending on the size of your user base, but they have to run for a bit. Yeah. So
the cost of the effort ends up being a big influence of what people choose. Yeah.
It's kind of like a low effort, high impact, kind of trying to find the low hanging fruits. That's what we do usually also during an audit with a client, because if we already define low hanging fruits, then we can execute these while doing the audit. So no one has to wait. We can do 2 work streams at the same time and have already some impact while we are evaluating everything else.
Beautiful.
That's good. I was thinking of React. So a lot of when I've talked to CRM folks about retention and reactivation falls in the same bucket. They struggle with, I say, like a feeling of guessing. Like I know I need to reactivate the user, but how? You know what I mean, though? But it's kind of like, do I throw a discount, or do I announce a feature, or do I, I don't really, it feels like I'm throwing stuff at the wall. And in some ways, onboarding feels like that. Like sometimes it's really sequential. Sometimes it's like, I just want people to see the different things I have. So I try this. Does that work? Does it not work? I try this. Does that work? Does it not work? Does this, is there some form of systematized way that you help people determine like what things they should either try or use for retention or reactivation, or in some way is it kind of like, here are the 5 main ways, either a discount or a new feature or a something, and we just try one of those. I mean, I'm sure you have a better setup than what I've seen, but is there some logic to the way that you can handle that a little more systematically?
I honestly don't have a system for user reactivation, because I really look at each product. I don't like to put them all into one box. So I look into each product, we come up with several ideas. Like my team and I, like they have crazy creative minds and come up with great ideas on what to do. And I think that's also the same with reactivation. Like you need to really understand, why did the user come in the first place to your product? Have we maybe made changes that now could lead them to come back? So then you don't need a discount, because I'm also not a fan of throwing out discounts. It's not smart to just give like 50% off right away and then you do it every time and you just cannibalize your pricings. It's not smart. So rather, and that's something that many companies still don't do, because they do things by gut feeling or I don't know what, but they don't really think about the user. And I always, throughout my whole career, I was always thinking, so what would I do if I would have downloaded this app? That's why I, like all the clients I work with, I download their apps, I get all the communication, I look into everything, because you need to really understand what would the user feel like. What does the user feel like? So I think it's really important to really understand, why did the user come in the first place? What did they expect? What have you not delivered in that time? Why did they not come back? To then touch up on this. And really, with all the data that you already have, you can usually personalize this communication a lot. Like, I don't know, if we have a fitness app and someone says, during the onboarding, they said, I'm here because I want to feel better mentally. Then you can pick this up in your copy, right? You have like a really personalized copy. You say, hey, Annika, you came here to improve your mental health. Like, how are you feeling today? Can we help you with something? And you bring them back to this, or has your well-being improved? Is there something you want us to improve? And you get more data from the user. You get more feedback. And I think that's really important. And also this user feedback, like constant feedback, is so important to improve your product, because you want them to use it. Then you need to understand what they want, not what you want and what you think the next feature should be, right? So, yeah, that's my approach. Not really systematic, more like on a psychological level.
Well, you're studying psychology, right? No, I think it's brilliant, though. I've felt like a bad person because I say that a lot of apps in communications, and a lot of companies in general, feel like they don't think about the user. And it's exactly to your point, that I have a certain product I need to move, so I offer a discount, or I need a certain amount of things, so I offer a discount, or I have some kind of business self-interest that I need to launch a discount. And it's not to say that those don't exist, because the business needs to survive, so they need some interest. But I think you're dead on that we need to have more of a focus on the user, at the user level, in how we craft our experience and our messaging, because it's at the core of when we create it, right? Why did we create whatever we created? Well, I mean, there's a business side of that too, but we're solving a user problem, or else there is no business. So we need to maintain that through the process. So I would say you do have a system. It's not rigid like step 1, step 2, step 3, but that's absolutely a system of, and sometimes these companies benefit from having, someone like yourself who's external to bring them back to the customer focus, which so often gets lost. So yeah, I think
you have a good point there with like bringing people back, because I see it with myself, right? That's why this agency work is cool, because you are exposed to many different problems through different clients and industries, and you like have a different eye on this, like a different view on how this works. But when I used to work in-house, like after a year or two, you get like kind of blind to certain problems, and you just, keep on working. So I think everyone would benefit from sometimes just bringing someone in for maybe even a week or two, right? To just review things and give some fresh ideas that could be tested, because it's really easy to get stuck in your way of working. And it's not working anymore, but you're also like, I don't know what to do. And I was like, I have no good ideas currently. So I think it's good to sometimes get this new point of view as well.
There's our sales pitch for Phiture. Anybody who's listening who needs an outside perspective, Annika Dunaway is selling us some Phiture right now. No, I absolutely agree. I think one thing we've seen on the from CRM folks, we've heard, for example, that the CEO says push works, we need more revenue, send more push. So it depends on how your metric is. But sometimes when you're pushed by like, I need X amount of visits, I need X amount of clicks, I need X amount of revenue, it forces us into every day becomes a scramble. And it's really hard to step back and kind of look at everything from an outside perspective and think what's actually meaningful versus it's just hard to break from that stream, especially when you have a lot of pressure on top kind of pushing you. So I didn't mean to cut you off, Paul.
I mean, I went through that as well, through like either VPs coming in saying, we need this amount of orders this weekend. This is the money we spend, split it into vouchers and send it, So this is something also we need these amount of clicks or sessions to show off. But then I'm like, this is a one-off thing, right? Like, how sustainable is this? It's obviously not sustainable at all for anyone to do this every weekend. But rather finding something, and I understand as a CEO or also like whatever, CFO probably too, you want to see this money coming in fast and the engagement coming in fast. But sometimes it takes a little longer, but then it's rather, it lasts longer too. It's like this engagement where people feel like they are understood and they feel like you do it actually for them and they are happy to come back. I think someone told me, I don't know, years ago, someone said, well, if your product doesn't really need marketing, it's a good product. Like bad products need a lot of marketing because they somehow have to sell themselves. But a good product sells itself, basically, So, and that's something that I never forget. So I find it really interesting when I start looking at new products. I'm like, would this sell itself? Probably not yet, So
that's funny.
Although to your point, if a message is part of the product experience, like let's say with fitness, right, where it's kind of like the value of a reminder of like that you're not just doing the workout to work out, but because, right, it relieves some stress, then that message can be, it can be defined as marketing, selling the product, or it might be actually that reminder is part of the value of the product itself. Right. Because, to come to the psychology part, right, we actually are not really one person ourselves, right? We're these mix of emotions and desires over time. Yeah. And a product is kind of helping us sort of balance one versus the other. So I think there's an interesting element of that, because I've heard that saying as well. And on the product side of me loves it, but the part that's come to appreciate marketing kind of says that's an unfair definition of marketing, that it's just selling versus.
That's true, yeah. But I think maybe that's then also the combination of having CRM in the product, right? Because you just said that message brings a value to the product, and that's what it should do. That's right. Not like just bringing someone in because they got a voucher. Like this today you get like 20% off. Well, then you use the app and then you stop using it again for like months until you get a next voucher. There's like a product I used to use, and I know that if I don't use it for 3 months, I get 50% off. So I'm just waiting for the 50% off, and I just do it again. It's like, it's really like a habit now. You're like, oh, well, I'll get one. I get one.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah,
one more
So that's not what you want, obviously, with your product. So I like that you said it should add a value, because that's what CRM messages should be doing. And I mean, I don't want to speak bad of marketing. Like, marketers do a great job when they do acquisition and stuff. That's their job. It's great.
Yes.
But I think as soon as the user lands on the product, it shouldn't be marketing anymore. It should be the product CRM people who design a journey together for the user.
Yeah, it's well put. Well put. I knew it would come back up. Okay, so tooltip. You kind of split. There's the work of the design in the first place, where you're doing all this auditing, and then like you're identifying the goals, and you're kind of trying to think through what you can do and where the low-hanging fruit is. Right, and we haven't really gotten to the details, like the operational details. Right now, let's implement this. But while you're still in that more design strategic, any tools that you use as part of your flow? Because, to this question of, it's intuitive, but it's informed by your experience. It's informed by your own mental models of the user and how they're using the product. But where are you doing all this work? Is it like in a Google Doc? Is it in a Slack chat? Is it an email? And then any tips that you've picked up over time in terms of how you structure things?
Yeah, I think we have different ways of working, mainly due to different client preferences. Mm. But what we use is Airtable for campaign backlog. So we create campaign backlogs for our clients, and within Airtable, we can also pull data via API for reporting purposes. So per campaign, you would get all the reporting in there too, which is really nicely visualized for the client itself. And obviously, we are also experimenting. Like, we're not just doing gut feeling campaigns, right? We put something there, but it will always be an A/B test or ABC test to make sure that it's working. And that will also go into Airtable as a result. So the client can just look into this and sees right away what's going on. Also Google Docs, Sheets, Asana boards. I personally prefer Looker if a client has that, because it's really nice to build beautiful dashboards with a really great overview if the data is there. But we are working with really everything that the client prefers and they work with. But it's often also Google Sheets and Google Docs. Yeah.
Pretty common.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there is any really great solution yet on the market that would combine it all. I mean, Airtable gets close, but you also need someone who puts this all together, right? Or who gets the data for you into that. So you cannot do it by yourself easily.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the gap, Airtable is really good at knitting things and just being accessible and then nicely structured. Yeah. I think what I would imagine CRM teams or marketing teams or product teams needing with that is more of the template. Because once you get into data reporting and things like that, you've got basically rows and columns that can be aggregated and reformatted, and what level of granularity are you looking at? And unless you've done that before, you can make a lot of mistakes. Or you can just spend a lot of time trying to reformat and reposition. Yeah. So it's almost like the probably the template of how you can construct those sheets in your head is worth an amazing amount to the client. Yeah, yeah. So because it's a great tool, but you have to. It really requires you to know how to use it, not just in terms of how to use Airtable, but how to use it to solve a CRM. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Also pulling data in and stuff, it would have been nice to have a template, because we involved analysts to create the JavaScripts that fix the data and stuff. So I wouldn't have the time to do it all by myself. So someone has to help out. And then you need these resources, right? And that is also something that I think many clients or companies itself struggle with, to have the resources to help you build a good reporting. But without that reporting, how do you measure your impact and your success, right? So it's really tough sometimes. It's when you talk about it, you feel oh, that's also straightforward. Isn't it wouldn't you think about this? But it seems like it's really not. And then I feel really sad for those teams. So where's your reporting? They're well, we don't have it. We have some in the sheets. I'm in Google Sheets? I was yeah, we copy paste it manually every day. And I'm oh, wow, okay, let's fix this for you first, let's write a business case for this dashboard, So, yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I actually talked to an app a little bit ago that was online learning, and they were we were doing reporting, but it didn't really add any value. So they just stopped. Oh. I'm yeah, I'm well, it doesn't add value if you don't go back and look at it and make changes, and yeah. So just putting numbers in Airtable doesn't. You're right. That doesn't do anything. But you have to, part of that's a systemic thing where part of your process has to be to go review it regularly and update things and put it to use, which is hard when it's inconvenient. So that's where it's like, I can't necessarily blame the team. To your point, if it's spread out and it's in a million places and you don't have it in one place, like maybe that's the root of the problem. It's not the collection of feedback itself, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Often that's the problem. It's like the data is there. It's just all over the place. And like just getting it cleaned up into one place. It's like, it's not easy when you already have a big infrastructure, but when people, and that's what I really like to do with clients as well, when they just start integrating the different tools, I like to really write down with them a list of the first campaigns they want to run, like 3 to 5 use cases, and then we define events and attributes for that, and event properties, and those events, then we decide, are they all needed in this tool, are they all needed in this tool, what are we triggering with this? So it's like a little exercise to actually understand, do I need all this? Instead of dumping everything that you have in your backend that no one needs and just leads to confusion and also higher costs, because often tools then go by data points, right? That also costs you a lot of money. So I think that's always a good thing to start with, to have this clean base. Like often we clean up first on the client side. We're like, can we just go through this and clean this up? Because otherwise, where should you start? You take over someone else's stuff, and you're like, I don't even know where to start with this. So, yeah, cleaning up is, I think, a clean data infrastructure really important, I think, for working efficiently.
That's good. I had a question of what's the biggest mistake you see most apps making today, and I'm like, it's kind of broad. We talked about the CRM teams. Where do they fall, marketing versus product? But if you had to say it, maybe at a user engagement level, but I want to leave it broad, so not like specifically in messaging, but kind of what's the common thing that you see? What's the biggest thing you see when you start? You're like, I pretty much guarantee that this company is making this problem. Is there any such problem like that?
I think the biggest problem is that what is implemented in terms of campaigns, what I see often when we just go down that route, it's that nothing has been tested. It's like the biggest mistake that they make is to just put it out there because they think that's, my gut says it's good, and then they put it out, but it was not tested with. So, and I think we talked about it in our last talk about the intelligent timing, for example, right? So you test this, you see a little uplift, but it's not really intelligent. It's just like based on 3 cents, and then it would always send at the same time. But then, as Paul said earlier, people change, desires change, actions change, right? So, and it always has to change as well. So your messages have to change, your send time, your style, your images, like everything has to change. It's not a constant. It's not like you let your campaigns run for a year. You cannot expect the same output that you had in month 1 and 2, right? So it's like kind of a constant process of experimenting, evaluating, putting new experiments out. And that's something that rarely any company does because it takes time, and this time no one really has or no one wants to take. Especially when you have a small user base and reaching significance, that takes 2, 3, 4 weeks, maybe more. It's like people don't want that really, but that this is actually a key to reach like where your goal and where you want to go. It's like something that not everyone wants to accept, I think, or go with. So yeah, I think that's the struggle that I see often, that people just do things with gut feeling instead of experimenting and keeping on running the experiments.
We were just
not give people an out there, because there's definitely an element of like understanding this lesson and then acting on it. But to actually loop back to the first part of the conversation, I think there really is a tool element here, and I would love to hear what you think about this. But there's a tool element in the sense that it really is hard to actively test and hard to actively update and hard to do these things. And I kind of trace it. I've been increasingly tracing it back to that original problem of it being this gray, no percent, like lost space between a much more well-resourced and funded product team and a much more well-resourced and funded performance marketing team. and then like the CMO's attention is going to the top of the funnel acquisition, and you're spending lots of money on Meta or Snap or wherever else you're spending it, and the product team is like the team. They that's the perceived place of the elite in the organization, usually, in the sense that they get a lot of internal capital, a lot of credibility. They're building the product that the company is built around, and so they get the tool stack is just much better than this space of, well, it's not really in the product. It really fundamentally is part of the product experience, but it's not in the actual Android or iOS UX, UI. And so, you get these CRM teams where there is a VP coming in to kind of repeat what you said, asking for those numbers, but the rest of the time, nobody's really paying attention. And if they turn around and ask for tools, and the tools don't even really exist anyway. They've got whatever they've got. That's what's available. But because I think, you're totally right that that's a big mistake, and it is partly a problem of mindset and awareness. But it seems like it's also a problem of tooling.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're right. It's I see often that companies build stuff themselves because they think it's easier to maintain or it's cheaper, but in the end, I guess it's way more expensive because you need the resources, you need the people maintaining the tool. Then you have people like developers leaving the company who built this. No one knows how this was done, So a lot of stuff happening there where you would think it's common sense, but then I'm like, why are you not just, this tool does exactly what you want. Why don't you pay for this? In the end, it's much cheaper, right? Because the maintenance is done for you. You have one-time implementation, maybe some SDK updates here and there, but nothing that would take weeks and months to build. And that is still something that puzzles me sometimes, I have to say. When I hear this, I'm like, but why? I really don't understand. So that's really an interesting thing. I think it's with your tool as well. I told you about it. There were people I talked to that are interested because I thought your tool is exactly that would solve this problem that we are facing. Like everyone suddenly wants to jump on the hype train AI. Everyone wants to be better with this. And this is one of the topics that we're trying to solve here is like having copy personalized for the user, tied to the user ID, basically. So we came up with like a little workaround to kind of test 5 copies, 10 copies first and narrow down to 5. So then you still have just 5 copies, but not like bits and pieces. So, and then I came across your tool and I was like, you know what, this solves all my problems. I need this, I was like, look, guys, we don't need to build all this. It's all Band-Aids, what we're building anyways. It will not last forever. It's not scalable. It's just like little tests. It's helpful to write a business case to then say, look, this is really good. Why don't we then get this tool to do the rest for us, right? So this is definitely a part of tooling as well, to have the right tool at your hand that save you the money and the time and work efficiently. So in this case, you would do the experimenting in the background, right? So the copy testing is not necessary anymore. The timing testing is not necessary anymore. So as a marketer, I can then think about other experiments that I want to run, like images, different flows of messages, like a lot of other things you can then focus on, which I find way more important. And then as well with the tools, I struggled a lot in the past where I worked in-house to say, well, I also need a dashboard because I need to know how this performs. And going into the actual CRM tool, pulling the data every day, trying to make sense out of it in a Google Sheet or whatever, obviously not efficient, because then a lot of time you spend on this that you could have spent on being creative with new ideas for your clients, right? So tools definitely play a big role, and that's why I think some companies need to be a bit more agile and a little bit more everyone wants to be agile, but being agile is tough. I think, but tools like that make us agile, right? Tools that we have that help us make the companies agile in itself. So, yeah, it's a little tough sometimes, but I think it's getting there.
And it's clear it can be done. I think that's the thing, is that like if you look at performance marketing, they're clearly doing things at a completely another level of scale.
Yeah.
And now it's expected. And if you're not doing that, it's like, it's naive. You're underutilizing power. If you don't have thousands of keywords running, then you're not doing anything. So it's clearly possible. It's just, again, it's not been developed. Fascinating.
I had two more questions for you. One is just a fun one for my own experience, and then the next one will be more helpful. But I am curious, what is the most interesting A/B testing result or insight you've ever uncovered, and then how did you even decide to A/B test that thing that you found out? Do you have one in mind? You laugh, so I'm hoping you have one in mind.
Wow, that's a tough one because we run so many experiments. And lately, I've just supported like decision making, but not really running it myself. I think I can tell you about my best performing campaign I've ever sent, if that works. That was actually a Delivery Hero, and it was at the beginning of times and in-app messages. So it was my first in-app message I've ever sent, and I was really excited about it. And it was a cooperation with Amorelie, which is like a sex toy shop, I guess, store. So it was really fun because I was like, look, it's Valentine's Day. I think it would be really cool to cooperate with them on food. And people were like, I don't know, it's a little weird. I was like, well, but they have these like little packages they would give us, like a surprise pack. We don't know what's in there. We just say it's like a little package from Amorelie. So if you place your order now, you would be in a raffle for like 5 of these surprise packages. That campaign just went through the roof. It was like, it had a really simple image with like food on the bed. And it was like, take part in this raffle, like place your order now, you'll be in this raffle. And people went wild. Like I've never seen a click-through rate like that, like increase of probably like 40, 50%. It was just insane of how people were acting with that. And so I was like, okay, so people say sex sells, and I'm sure it's still a thing. So it's still working, even with food. So I was really excited about that first one. And that's how I also got really into in-app messages. And so I really like to do that, try different things there. I'm currently working with a big client on in-app messages with a countdown. They launched a campaign, I think 2 weeks ago, and she said, wow, our click rate and click-through rate was amazing with that countdown in-app. So, yeah, I'm really happy to test more of that. But next time I'll talk to you. I'll come up with some experiment then that I have ran.
That one's pretty awesome anecdote. I love it.
Things I thought we would never discuss on the podcast, part 1.
Yeah.
No, that's funny. You got to make sure the count.
Sorry, I should have asked first if I can do that.
No, you're totally fine.
It's the stuff of life, food and.
The trick with the countdown is not to have it restart every time someone comes back to the page, because then it loses a little bit of its luster, right?
Yeah,
I've seen that.
That doesn't really work. That's true.
So let's close on this one. From your experience, what is one small thing that a CRM team could do today that would kind of make the biggest difference?
Maybe have a meeting with your product team and discuss the user journey they had in mind to, just listen to them, listen to what they thought about the user journey, what should come in when and what should happen when. And then you can decide to actually send messages at that time to bring that user back to where they left off. I think that's
awesome.
Good one to do.
And we brought it right back to the beginning.
That's right.
Look at that. See, there you go.
There's so much depth to just that one observation. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
That's good.
You enjoyed this. And thank you.
We got a lot of.
Really happy.
Absolutely. Yeah, we were super excited about this one. Honestly, I'm only sad that we can't just extend it into like a week-long event, We could have our own like Burning Man event right here. That's
Nice.
I'm sure if we could like dive deeper into this, it would be like a master class for everybody listening, which is so cool because again, your experience is amazing. So thank you so very much, Annika, for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thank you. Yep. And thank you for everybody who's tuning in. We hope you've learned something as well that'll help inspire your own work. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and share. Give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And that is all for this week. And we'll see you again next week. Thanks, everybody.